This is the Italian Citizenship Podcast, hosted by Marco Permunian and Rafael Di Furia. Hello there, and welcome to another edition of the Italian Citizenship Podcast, presented by ItalianCitizenshipassistance.com. Of course, we are back at it again with the one and only attorney, Marco Permunian. How you doing, man?
Hey, good. How are you?
I am doing great, thank you. And today, we wanted to get into the topic of what goes on after you make an application for Italian citizenship and when you're living there, what you have to go through, what that process really ends up being like. So, Marco, I knew in this episode we were going to talk about both citizenship by descent as well as citizenship by marriage, just because there are some things that may have some crossover in there. But let's maybe get started with citizenship by descent, because we've spoken a lot about making the application in Italy and what that's like, what you have to do, how you get your papers in order and all of that, and how you help your clients through that process. But what are things like once you have actually gone there with your client, they've made the application, submitted it to the Comune? What happens from that point onward?
A lot of people are interested in understanding what they can do, what they cannot do during the process. It's kind of a phase where you have applied for citizenship, but you're not yet an Italian citizen. So, of course, there are a lot of things to be taken into consideration. And I believe we're going to answer a lot of questions today. But let's start from the beginning. When you apply for citizenship by descent through an Italian municipality, if the process takes longer than 90 days, which is normally the case, you will be forced to apply for a residency permit called permesso di soggiorno in attesa di cittadinanza, a very difficult sentence, which basically means residency permit for people awaiting citizenship. To make an application for this residency permit, you have to have applied for citizenship by descent through the municipality, and you need to have a receipt released from the municipality, from the citizenship office within the town hall. And with that receipt, you can go to the post office. The post office in this case is going to be the middleman. So you're going to have to file your request for this residency permit through the post office, which will basically forward it to the local immigration office, which in Italy is called questura. And just to clarify for the people that are watching us, the questura is actually part of the National Italian Police Authority. So they have a specific office which deals with immigration, but it's actually the Italian police. But anyway, the way it works is that when you go to the post office with the receipt from the Comune, you're going to have to fill out a kit, so multiple documents which are provided to you by the post office, and you will receive a receipt from the post office, which basically is already a temporary residency permit. So although it's not the actual residency permit, with that receipt released from the post office by law, you have the right to continue residing in Italy while your application is being processed. The same receipt will also indicate the appointment with the questura, which you will have to attend. That's normally after a couple of months, that you will have to attend for the questura to take your fingerprints, which will basically be needed for to finalize your residency permit application. So just to clarify, normally the process to get this residency permit can take several months. So the first step is to go to the post office, fill out these documents, and then you're given a temporary receipt, and then there's an appointment with the questura, and then you will receive in the mail the actual residency permit, which is a plastic card like a driver's license. So basically what happens is that you will get in the mail at your Italian address this plastic card, which is your residency permit, which will be mailed to you upon completion of processing your application.
So until that time that a person receives this plastic card in the mail, do they have something that proves that they have the ability to stay in Italy? Because I know some people may want to have something that shows that they are legal to be there. Even if they never need it, they like to have that backup in their wallet just in case. Is there anything that you get? I mean, is this the receipt that you were talking about before? Or is there anything else that you get in the interim?
Yeah, exactly. It's the receipts that I was talking about before, the one that was released by the post office, and that allows you not only to reside in Italy. Again, it's a temporary receipt, so it's not the actual residency permit, but legally speaking, it's the same thing. So it allows you to reside in Italy for the duration of the citizenship application process, but also it allows you to travel back and forth from abroad. So you're free to travel abroad if you have to and re-enter with that receipt. So basically the advantage is that the Schengen rules for tourists do not apply to you anymore because you are, legally speaking, a residency permit holder, even if you only have that receipt. Of course, we said this in our videos many times that during the process, you are supposed to reside in Italy. So while you can take trips and business trips, go back home if you have to, you should try to spend the majority of your time in Italy.
Definitely makes sense there that you would want to spend that time in Italy. Are there any other parts of the process that a person should keep in mind during this time? I know that even during the residency check, for example, the police will come and check that the person is living there. Will anything like that happen? Are there any more residency checks, or are there any other things that the person has to submit to the Italian government? Or once they've already gone through that process to get the permesso di soggiorno in attesa di cittadinanza, is that something that is just, that's the finished part and then it's a waiting game from there?
It's mostly a waiting game, so there could be potentially other checks, as you said. So basically now we're talking about the fact that the municipality will actually check during the citizenship process that you reside in the property that you indicated to be your residency. Normally they check only one time at the very beginning of the process, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 times, but at the beginning, and once they have confirmed that you actually live there, they're not going to check again. But to answer your question, they could if they wanted to. So there's nothing that prevents them from checking again. So it's very important for people who have applied for citizenship in Italy to try to remain in the country, and more specifically at your residency address as much as they can.
So from what you're saying then, it does sound as though that you could take a little vacation, and I would assume there would be many people out there that even though you're supposed to be kind of residing in the same place, that they might want to take a little trip during their time in Italy. What would the rules be like for somebody who is in this situation who wants to go and take maybe a weekend trip to Munich or to London or somewhere else in the European Union, even though London is no longer a part of the European Union? Is this something that the person is allowed to do during their process? Are they allowed to travel within the Schengen area, or are there any restrictions on that person?
That's a good question. So as we just said, the person should try to remain in Italy, and more specifically at the residency address for as much as they can. But residency is a flexible concept, so you don't have to be there every single day. You can take trips, you can go where you have to go if you have to. But to your point, you can travel within the European Union, yes, but with some limitations, meaning that while you are in Italy, you don't have to worry about how much time you can spend in Italy, because you have this residency permit or the receipt that we just talked about that is the same as the residency permit. So that allows you to stay in Italy for as long as you need to until your application is processed. But when you go outside of Italy and within the EU, basically the Schengen rules for tourists apply. So if you want to go to France or Germany, you can do so, but you have to respect the Schengen regulations. So basically you can only stay for up to 90 days, and then you will have to either go back to Italy or go outside of the EU. But as we just said, you shouldn't stay that long outside of Italy while your application is being processed.
Definitely makes sense. And I guess one of the things that also may come up with this is that there are going to be a lot of people who may not be single and they have a family, kids, husband, wife, whatever it may be. How does that work during this process? I'm assuming that the children would get this permesso di soggiorno also because their parent is applying for Italian citizenship, or am I wrong about that? And then also, just to kind of compound these questions on top of each other, what is the situation for potentially the non-Italian spouse or the spouse who may not be applying for Italian citizenship by descent during this process?
Yeah, as you just said, this residency permit process will apply to the children as well. So if the applicant for citizenship by descent has minor children, then the minor children will basically go through the same exact process. So they will, at the end of the day, be allowed to stay in Italy with their mother or father for as long as they need to until the process is complete. The situation of the spouse is a little bit complex, and it actually depends on the area where the application is being filed. So let's start from the worst case scenario. There will be some areas in Italy that don't allow the non-Italian spouse to reside in Italy during the process started by the spouse of Italian descent. So there's a situation where the spouse of Italian descent can stay in Italy with their minor children for as long as the process takes, but the non-Italian spouse cannot. So the only solution at that point for the non-Italian spouse is to go back and forth and stay 3 months in Italy and 3 months outside of the EU. It's not an ideal situation, but it's what it is. It's something that I want to say it's something that the Italian law has not covered yet. The ability for the spouse, like clear indications that say what the spouse of somebody who has started the process for citizenship by descent in Italy can or cannot do. So in a worst case scenario, the spouse could be forced to stay in Italy for 3 months and then outside of the Schengen area for 3 months, and then back again for 3 more months until the spouse of Italian descent has completed the process. Now, a lot of people may be wondering, so we have to be separated. Unfortunately, the reality is that you may have to. Now, as I said before, it's not that the person who applies for citizenship needs to stay in Italy every day during the process. So there is some flexibility there. And I've seen situations where the applicant for citizenship has gone out for 3 months with their non-Italian spouse, and then they re-entered again altogether 3 months after. And that's a situation that normally does work. So in this worst case scenario, that's something that people could consider doing. Now, as I said before, though, it depends on the area. So the one that I just described is the very worst case scenario, because there are some areas that allow the non-Italian spouse to apply for a residency permit in connection to her or his spouse's residency permit, the one that is called in attesa di cittadinanza. So basically they allow the non-Italian spouse to get a residency permit for family reasons because their spouse of Italian descent has his or her own residency permit released by the Italian Questura. So they interpret the law in a way that allows the non-Italian spouse to get this residency permit for family reasons. However, I've seen that most places in Italy, they allow the non-Italian spouse to get this residency permit for family reasons only when the Italian spouse gets the residency permit plastic card that we talked about. So not immediately in the process, but later in the process. It could be like 3, 4, 5, 6 months after, depending on how quickly the applicant receives in the mail this plastic card. So that's the moment normally when the non-Italian spouse is allowed to apply for this residency permit for family reasons. There is also a third scenario, because I've seen some areas in Italy, and as you can imagine, it depends on the area, because every questura has a different interpretation of the law, a different vision of how things should work. So I've seen also some questure release this residency permit to the non-Italian spouse immediately. So in the same moment when the applicant for citizenship submits the postal kit at the post office, the residency permit kit at the post office, and gets the temporary receipt. I've seen some questure in Italy allowing the non-Italian spouse to apply for their residency permit for family reason in that exact moment, which is, of course, the best scenario, which would allow the couple to be able to reside together during the citizenship process from the very beginning of the process.
That is amazing. I mean, it's like, especially with everything we know about how things work often in Italy, and sometimes the way that things work can maybe make it a little bit more complicated, but there are the other times where those nuances of how the Italian system works, that it actually can really benefit the person or family in this case that would be going through that process. So that's absolutely fantastic that there are places that do exist and do have that interpretation of the law.
But of course, with all that being said, when the spouse of Italian descent obtains citizenship by descent, at that point, there is no problem anymore for the non-Italian spouse, because the non-Italian spouse, when his or her spouse has become an Italian citizen, they will qualify for a residency permit for spouses of EU citizens, which is kind of like a green card. So it's a very solid residency permit, which allows to work and to use the healthcare and to stay in Italy for as long as your Italian spouse resides in Italy. It allows to reside also in other European countries. And we have done episodes about the residency permit for spouses of citizens of the European Union. So just to clarify, so far we've talked about the situation where the spouse of Italian descent was in the process of acquiring Italian citizenship by descent. So what happens to the spouse during that process? And what I just said now it's regarding the what the non-Italian spouse can get when the spouse of Italian descent has become an Italian citizen.
Interesting. I'm glad you added that little clarification there, because I think it's very important to understand that we are talking about this part of the process where there could be these little hiccups, and you have to understand the nuances of the Italian system and how it works, and how really at the end of the day, it's up to the interpretation of the person enacting the law. And to be able to understand as well that there are those times where the interpretation may lead to what can feel like a complication, but then there are other times like this where the interpretation can really be for the benefit of the couple, at least during the process. And then, of course, after, then this is not even a consideration anymore, like you were just saying, just to kind of quickly recap that. But you mentioned about work and healthcare. During this process, I know we did an episode, I believe at the end of 2020, talking about an update that allowed for people to work. But when it comes to the person who is of Italian descent and making that application, at what point is it that they can start working? Are there any limits to the work activities that they can do before they're a citizen? How does that all look like?
That's a very good question. A lot of people are wondering, can I work while I'm waiting for my citizenship to be processed? And the answer is no. You cannot do any work. You cannot work for an Italian company. You cannot pay taxes. You can do anything because you're just awaiting citizenship. So this residency permit that allows you to reside in Italy only allows you to reside, but not to do any work activities. But recently, as you just said, the Italian government made a law that allowed the basically conversion of this residency permit for people awaiting citizenship into a work permit. It's a quite complex process, but absolutely doable and worth looking into that. There's a lot of paperwork to be provided, and you have to make an application to change your status, and it's worthwhile to do the application, to make the application at an early stage in the process, because it takes some time for the conversion process to happen. And I believe we give a lot of information about the conversion of the residency permit into work permit in that episode that we made. So I would invite people to look at that episode, because we did speak about this in detail, and because it's such a complex process. In order not to create any confusion and just give partial information, I think it's better to just refer our audience to that episode that we released in our YouTube channel when the law came into effect.
Yeah, that was, I mean, when that came into effect, that was kind of amazing, because it was, like you were saying, this type of visa didn't allow for it. And I know there's many young people, like 20s, 30s, and so on, that are still working, or even 40s, that they needed to be able to support themselves. And sometimes figuring that out and how to make that all work would be a little bit complicated, especially, again, working locally. But you did before mention about healthcare. Just to maybe get into that a little bit, does the person of Italian descent making the application have the right to healthcare before they're recognized as an Italian citizen, or is that something that only comes after the fact?
Yes, the answer is yes. So the person who is waiting for the citizenship process to be completed can apply for registration into the national healthcare system. So that allows the person to be assigned a doctor, a general practitioner in Italy, because that's the way it works in Italy for basically everybody. You are normally assigned a general physician that you have to work with for your basic needs, and then who will refer maybe specialists or tell you what to do to go further in the process if you have any health issues. But the answer is yes, you can register. You will be assigned a general physician, and you can also use the Italian healthcare system the same way that the Italians are allowed to use it.
That's fantastic. I know the Italian healthcare system, I've had some very positive experiences for, unfortunately, I guess you could say, having to have dealt with them. I mean, it's really amazing what services are at your fingertips and the cost or lack thereof for some of them. Again, going to a general practitioner in Italy, I've mentioned this in episodes before. The first time that I went to one in Italy, I was very surprised, because at the end of the interaction, I was like, okay, so how much is it for today's visit? He looked at me like, what's wrong with you? What's going on here? He said, no, this doesn't cost anything. He says, you only have to pay for this little pill or whatever. And you don't pay me, you pay it at the pharmacy. I was like, what? I was like, I had my wallet out in front of me. I was like going in there. I was like, this doesn't cost anything at all. He's like, are you trying to bribe me? Like, no. Because I didn't understand that. And then even dealing with the emergency room, depending on what it is that you're doing, if it's a normal emergency room visit, that could be, say, like 15 euros, depending on the region that you're in. If it's a really horrible emergency, it may not cost anything. I had a relative who went through a very, very intense bone break and surgery and everything. And it was really amazing to see that this relative was very well taken care of during the process, and it just was part of the healthcare service. And it really, I have to say, is absolutely amazing what is done in Italy.
Yeah, probably I should have said, but you said it, that it's completely free. So, but in Italy, not only you can register while you're awaiting your citizenship, but it's also completely or almost free of charge, as it is for any other Italian citizen.
Right. No, that's a huge deal right there. I mean, we do end up paying it through taxes and stuff, but still, like, to have access rather than no access, that's a blessing right there, if you ask me. But anyway, I do think that maybe it might be worthwhile to get it also into citizenship by marriage, like kind of we were mentioning before, that we wanted to cover both citizenship by descent and citizenship by marriage. And so for the person who would be applying for citizenship by marriage after their Italian spouse has been recognized formally as an Italian citizen, what does that look like, just kind of very briefly, and what do things look like after the application has been made?
Of course, we're talking about not only the person who is married to somebody who has made an application for citizenship by descent, but also for somebody who is married to an Italian citizen born in Italy, because it would be the same exact situation. But first of all, it would be a completely different situation from what we just talked about for the spouse of somebody making an application for citizenship by descent, because a person who has applied for citizenship through marriage and who is residing in Italy would already have the residency permit for spouses of citizens of the EU. So there's no question that that person can stay in Italy, reside in Italy, be registered with the national healthcare system, work in Italy. And I believe that what's worthwhile mentioning is that if somebody is residing in Italy and has made an application for citizenship through marriage, the application was accepted and it's being processed. The one of the few things that have to be taken into consideration is the fact that if there is a separation, legal separation or divorce between the spouses during the citizenship through marriage process, which can take 2 to 3 years, so a quite long time, well, first of all, you will not be able to complete the citizenship through marriage process, because at the end of the process, you will have to take the oath, and your spouse will have to be present and will have to declare that you're still legally married. So that's not the situation. That's not the case, of course, if you are divorced or legally separated. But also, you may lose your right to stay in Italy, or maybe I should say the ability to renew your residency permit for spouses of citizens of the EU, because that residency permit is connected to you being married to your husband or wife, and to you and your husband or wife residing together and being not separated or divorced. That, of course, does not apply if you, as the spouse of an Italian citizen, have resided in Italy for longer than 5 years, because after 5 years, you basically acquire the right to stay in Italy indefinitely. So you basically acquire the right to apply for a permanent residency permit, no longer connected to you being together with your spouse, being legally married. So if you have spent more than 5 years in Italy and you get divorced or you become legally separated, you don't lose the ability to continue residing in Italy, but of course you lose the ability to complete the process for citizenship through marriage.
And so I guess maybe taking it back a couple of steps just quickly, you did briefly talk about this, but maybe just to clarify a little bit more. But once the person does get their permesso for being able to stay in the country as the spouse of an Italian, do they have any limitations on work, on healthcare, on activities, on travel, on what they can do or what they can't do? Does that exist, or do they pretty much live in the country and exist as a regular person?
They have no particular limitations. with the exception of the right to vote for the Italian Parliament or European Parliament. But other than that, they can pretty much do anything that anybody else would be able to do. So they can work, they can register with the healthcare system, they can live freely in the country. There is a limitation in terms of traveling within the European Union. I don't know if I would call it a limitation. It's that as somebody who holds a residency permit for spouses, you can travel in the other European countries in compliance with the Schengen area regulations. So you're not free to travel in the European Union. You can basically only stay for 90 days outside of Italy and within the European Union, and then you were going to have to either return to Italy or go outside of the Schengen area. But what happens if you want to stay longer in another European country? Well, you only have to have your spouse move your residency in the other European country where you want to live. For example, Germany, your Italian spouse will have to relocate to Germany and register as a resident in Germany, and then you will be able to apply through the German government for a residency permit of spouses of EU citizens, which will be released by the German government. So it's no longer a document released by the Italian government, but a document released by the German government in this example.
Interesting. So, wow, okay. Again, this all makes a lot of sense that there's all these considerations to taking place. If the visa for where you're going to be or the registration is going to be dependent on the country that you're in, and it's not necessarily that simply being an Italian or a spouse of an Italian is something that's going to require you to always have to deal with Italy. But I think this may be a great place to round things off. So, Marco, of course, if anybody is needing any help with this process, how can they get in contact with you and your team?
People can contact us through our website, ItalianCitizenshipassistance.com, or give us a call. The number is on the website.
Absolutely fantastic. And of course, if you are interested in any more content like this about moving to Italy, Italian dual citizenship, about purchasing property in Italy even, be sure that you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, because on the YouTube channel, you are not only subscribed to the Italian Citizenship Podcast, but you're also automatically subscribed to the Italian Real Estate Podcast, or you can subscribe to the audio-only versions of each of these projects. But of course, also if you're interested in more about life abroad, living abroad as a dual citizen expat, living in Italy, living in the EU, be sure to come over to my YouTube channel, an audio-only podcast, through youtube.com/Rafael Di Furia, or Not Your Average Globetrotter on both YouTube as well as your favorite podcasting platform of choice. But of course, we have been here yet again with Italian attorney Marco Permunian from Italian Citizenship Assistance. I am Rafael Di Furia. Stay safe and healthy out there, and we will see you all next time. Later.
Thank you.